Have you ever had that sense that your PhD is just not working out quite the way you thought it was going to? Maybe you're in your second, third, more years along, and you had all these high hopes at the beginning of your PhD as to what you were going to achieve and what you were going to do, and things are just not quite working out the way you thought they would. And you're kind of ready to write up, or you're in the process of writing up, and it just all feels a bit disappointing. Well, that was the situation of a student that I met at a workshop I ran in London for the Wellcome Trust, which was amazing. Really, really able, motivated students. We were talking about career decisions and things like that. And she asked me afterwards, how do you stay motivated to write your thesis when you're a bit disappointed that you didn't do all the things that you intended to do? And she explained that this was just making it really hard for her to sit down and do the difficult work of writing when she was managing all these frustrations and disappointments with it not looking the way that she had dreamed it would look when she first started. And I just thought this was such an interesting question. And you can hit this kind of disappointment at any stage in your PhD. So don't worry, if you're not as far along as she is at the moment, you might still be experiencing this. Now, I answered it for her there in the workshop, and I thought it'd be useful for all of you to hear this answer because she found it really, really beneficial. And that is that you have to remember that the reason things are disappointing or frustrating now is not because your PhD is bad, and it's not because you've let yourself down or any of these things that we often tell ourselves it means. What it means is that you know more now than you did when you started. When we start our PhDs, we are necessarily optimistic and excited and hopeful. If we weren't, we wouldn't take on a 3, 4, 5, 6 year project. If we weren't experiencing those sorts of emotions and having those sorts of thoughts, we wouldn't even begin this thing. At that period running up to the PhD and in the first bits of it, we need to be really hopeful and excited about what we might achieve. We need to be dreaming big about the impact that we'll have and the discoveries that we'll make and all of that stuff, because that's what gets us through the application process, that really uncertain period at the beginning where you don't really know what you're doing. You kind of need to believe that it's going to go somewhere afterwards. So that past you that was hopeful and optimistic was super necessary to get you going on the PhD journey. However, you are now much more informed, you're much more knowledgeable, and you're much more immersed in what you've done. And that's a wonderful thing, but it has some negative effects as well. One of the negative effects is that we have, by necessity, had to reduce the scope of what we'd hoped to do. We've realized how over hopeful, over optimistic we were at the beginning. We've learned more about the details of the research process and how complicated some things can be. And we've necessarily had to change our project to accommodate that. Those are all exactly right. Those are exactly the things that you should be doing as you develop into becoming an independent researcher, taking big dreams and turning them into something that you can actually achieve, and managing the disappointment that that might not be everything you thought. This is a sign that you know so much more, that you have learned so much more during this period, which is a wonderful thing. It just makes you super attuned to any of the flaws and the kind of reduced scope of your work. The other thing is that you are more immersed in and kind of focused on this piece of research than you ever will be with anything you do in your life again. Because if you go into universities, carry on as a researcher, go into lecturing and all that stuff, you'll have multiple research projects. You'll have your own students. You'll have your teaching. You'll have your leadership, your admin. But while you're doing your PhD, you are fully immersed in this thing. And the downside of that is it also comes super mundane to you. Anything that we do every day, we can take for granted and not realize the wonderful things that we're doing because it's just normal. It's just what we do. I remember being at a conference once and some students from an American university were like, "Oh my God, is Doug Carroll your supervisor? Oh my God, you'd introduce us." Because he was quite a big dog in his field at the time. And I was like, "What, him?" Done. Yeah, fine, whatever. Come on. I don't understand why this is exciting, but sure, we can talk to him. Because for me, it was completely normal. I mean, don't get me wrong, he was a great mentor and I really enjoyed working with him and all those things. It's not to criticize him, but it's like you don't get excited about your own parents, right? Your own supervisor, pretty dull, see him all the time. But for them, he was this big academic and they were really excited to meet him. Familiarity had made it mundane. And the same is true when you talk about research. In the workshops that I run for universities, I always get people at the beginning to tell me about their research. And it all sounds so amazing. It's one of the reasons I love to work with PhD students and academics. You're all doing such cool stuff that brings so much interest to the world or solves big problems. Yet to you, it can feel really mundane because you've been doing it for the last 3 years. Now, how does this help? Well, the first thing is to recognize it, because often we think that because we're disappointed and frustrated, it means our PhD is bad. It means that we haven't fulfilled our promise. And I want you to see that it doesn't mean any of that at all. What it means is that you have hugely progressed since that hopeful, optimistic first year that started off. You know loads more. You've done it so much that it's become mundane. And that all of this is exactly how it should be. Final year PhD students are a little bit like older teenagers where like they're ready to leave the house. Okay. They're at that stage where their parents are annoying, everything they're doing is annoying. They're ready to move on to the next thing. And that's what final year, whatever age you are, that's what final year PhD students are like. You are ready to move on. So this does feel a bit mundane and a bit just boring and long. Okay. Nothing broken here. The other perspective that I want to bring to this is the perspective of future you, because future you is going to know more than you know now. And future you is going to have a perspective on your PhD that you don't have right now. They are going to realize what a big deal it was. They are going to be so proud of you for completing it. And so all we have to do is look after ourselves in this moment between the kind of hopes and optimism and dreams of past us and the future perspective where we will look back on this and realize what an achievement it is. We need to look after ourselves here. And that means saying things to ourselves that reminds us why it's important, reminds us why we're capable of it, reminds us why we wanted to do this in the first place, and really recognize the progress that we're making. Let's not make these worries or concerns into anything they don't need to be. They are just a sign that you are ready to finish your PhD. Let me know if that resonates with you and if you've got any further questions about that. You can ask in the comments below.